I think one of the reasons why a narrative is so effective in changing a person's heart and mind is that human beings were designed with this ingrained, this appetite for a story. It's how we hang meaning on our life.
Voices of WIA is just one of the many ways that Women in Apologetics strives to educate, equip, and encourage women in Christian apologetics. So if you love Voices of WIA, then I invite you to join our free email community where you will receive apologetic resources every single week and enjoy email community-only benefits like exclusive digital guides and a discount to our annual conference. And girlfriend, if you have not been to our annual conference, you really got to go because it's one of a kind. And you can sign up today by visiting womeninapologetics.com/email-community. So I'm just wondering, do you like to write? And do you want your life to contribute to the kingdom? I mean, honestly, I don't know anybody who doesn't want their life to contribute to the kingdom. And do you desire to use your unique skills and abilities to make an impact for Christ? Well, the answer is probably yes. So today, you're going to get to hear our guest teach you about creative writing as an apologetic. We have for you Tilly Dillehay, who is a pastor's wife and a homeschooling mother of 4 in the smallest county in Tennessee. She has written for Desiring God, the Gospel Coalition, and Risen Motherhood, and she's the author of the Christian book award-winning Seeing Green, Broken Bread, and My Dear Hemlock, which I've read a little bit about, and that is really creative and really inspiring. She co-hosts the Home Fires podcast and keeps trying to get beets to come up in her garden. So welcome today, Tilly Dillehay.
Hi, I'm so happy to be with you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you joined us today. I love, first of all, I love the idea that you were writing all these resources and that you're kind of tying that into an apologetic. So just to get started, how about you fill us and our audience in on kind of your faith background and how you got to where you are and what exactly that you do?
Okay, yeah. So I am, primarily I'm spending my time right now homeschooling my children and just supporting my husband in the local church ministry that he does. We are like the bio says, we're in a very very small town. I grew up in Nashville. I was raised in a Christian home and number two of 7 kids. So I had a dad who was sort of in the music world and after I went to college and really struggled a lot with a lot of personal things, eating disorder and other things like that, I ended up just walking away from the faith completely in my early 20s. So I ended up just kind of hitting a rock bottom spot, and my parents suggested that I go and visit with an old pastor friend of theirs out here in this tiny little town and get some biblical counseling from him. And they had me staying in their home, just kind of being around their family. Nobody was super cool out here, but everyone was just the relationships were in order and it was a household that was running well, on just basic obedience and faith. And I brought all of my objections to the faith into the counseling room, basically. And he
Excellent.
just said, well, let's just go through them one by one. And he did, there were several books that were also really instrumental in that time. But basically, at the end of about 2 weeks staying in that home, I said, okay, I'm a Christian. I'm in. So now what? And the now what for me ended up being I actually moved out here to this tiny little town. I didn't have work or anything, but people out here hosted me. And I ended up getting a job as a newspaper editor out here, actually. But I also met my husband, who's a pastoral intern at that time. Who's the only single man in the church, actually. And I thought I was escaping men everywhere, but there was one out here. So we started dating about a year and a half after I was saved and got married. So now I am out here for good, and I just love it. I love
That's
being
great.
in this little town. So yeah.
When you went to college,
Mhm.
Was it like what we would typically think of, like some big, huge state secular
Mm,
university that sort of went after your faith, or was it a smaller and you just struggled, or
mm.
what did that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, it was actually a small Church of Christ school in Nashville
Oh, wow.
called Lipscomb University. And I don't really lay a lot of that at the door of the university, like me walking
Okay.
away from the faith. It was just I was actually 16 years old when I went to school and lived in the dorms there, so I was very young, and a lot of it was just I think like not knowing how to manage normal life and normal stress. Also, my family was going through a lot, and I
Sure.
just did not have, I guess, the support I expected to have in those years. But a lot, and there was definitely some liberal Bible teaching happening in those classrooms, which is something you wouldn't get in a state school. But
Yeah. Well,
some
yeah, that's
Christian
true.
schools, you get more of an attack on like the inerrancy of Scripture. I do
Sure.
remember some of that in the classroom. But yeah, I think a lot of it was just depression and
Yeah.
really, really bad personal habits that damaged my
Yeah.
conscience and led me to walk away. So,
Sure. Now,
yeah,
would you have called yourself an atheist at that point?
I said an agnostic. I was just
Okay.
sort of like, I'm asking a lot of questions. I don't have answers. I have thought that the world had an upending, that the story was a good story, but just wishing that it was true doesn't make it so. Basically, is kind of what I was
Yeah.
saying. So yeah,
Okay. So at the
and
very least, you were a disillusioned Christian,
right.
perhaps.
That's right. I could have been just a deeply backslidden Christian,
Yeah.
but it is hard for me to look back and see any real interest in just in his word and in
Yeah. Sure.
obedience. I just feel like the language that if I ever used spiritual language, it was kind of in service of getting what I wanted, maybe. And that was one of the first things in the counseling room that we were dealing with. I mean, I had a lot of like innocent suffering was a big one for me, and um, how could how can any of us make any different decisions from the ones that we make because we are who
Oh,
we
sure.
are and all these factors kind of can't what how could we have gone another way basically?
Yeah.
How could it be any different from the way it is? But I think mainly what I was really wondering was why am I still such a mess? I've been in the faith community all this time. Why am I a mess? And is God who he says he is? Like, is
Yeah.
he good? Um, is there is there a way out, for a
Yeah.
person who's mired in sin? And I think that one of the really big things that he was walking me through early on was just um, reality. Like truth is true, whether you see it from a bunch of different angles or not. Like the historical evidence for Jesus being who he said he was,
Mm.
um, it's either true or it's false. And so being,
Yeah.
living in this agnostic world where there's no floor, there's no walls, there's no ceiling in your universe,
Yeah.
it was a terrifying place to be. And it's not like I liked being there.
Yeah.
But I just was kind of like, I just didn't see another way. So for him, a lot of it was something is either true or it's false. Like start there. Is it
Yes.
true or is it false? What he said about
Yes.
himself.
Yes.
And if it is true, what does that mean for you?
Right, right.
Mhm,
Well, thank you for sharing all of that because I think
mm,
that that really does contribute to a lot of the mayhem and conflict that we're
mhm,
dealing with um, nationally right now. Because, like you said, if there's no walls anywhere, if there's no up and down, then
mhm.
people are struggling to try to figure out what they can hang on to, struggling to figure out what to put their faith in, struggling to figure out what's really real and what they can count on in this life because life is obviously so difficult and so can be so unpredictable that they don't have
Right.
anything to hang on to. And so
Mhm.
I think that's a lot to do with it. So anyway, I really appreciate you showing that. That's really good. Okay, so typically around here, when we talk about apologetics, we talk
Mhm.
about, the usual, the arguments for God's existence, worldview issues,
Mhm.
the evidence from history, like you were talking about, the evidence for Jesus as a real person and the evidence for the resurrection. We talk about the reliability of the manuscripts and those kinds of things. We
Mhm.
don't normally talk about creative writing as an apologetic.
Yeah.
So let's just take as much time as we need to unpack that because I think that's really interesting. How do you connect the two, creative writing and an apologetic for the reality and the goodness of God? How do they connect?
Yeah. So, creative writing is all about narrative. It's all about story. And
Mhm.
even if you're not necessarily writing fiction, when we write something, and I would say this is true really for all of the arts. So I just as an aside, I think, visual art, when you paint something, when you write a song, when you if you're a dancer, the way that you dance, or the way that you design a room or a dress, those all of those the arts, they all tell a story about who God is. You're saying that something is true about God's world. This is what beauty is. This is what truth is. I think with narrative writing or creative writing, I think that's one of the most intense forms of it, because you're literally telling a story. But I think it's very important to understand that every person you interact with as a Christian who is trying to give an account for your faith, everyone you interact with runs on the food of stories.
Okay.
Like, it is one of the things that every person you meet has an appetite for, which is narratives, which is story. It's meaning, that they're it's not just facts. You couldn't just list a bunch of facts to someone and have them understand what the truth is. The truth is a story. The thing that God is doing in this world is a story.
Hmm.
So when we tell stories, well or poorly, we are imitating God in that. He is the great storyteller. And so
That's a good thought.
every time we tell a story, we're imitating him in that. But
Hmm.
I think one of the reasons why a narrative is so effective in changing a person's heart and mind is that human beings were designed with this ingrained, this appetite for a story. It's how we hang meaning on our life. So, and you've had that experience, I'm sure, where you get to the end of like a great movie, and you understand something about the world. You understand something about what is good and what is wicked, what is true and what
Right.
is false,
Yeah.
in a different way than if someone had just said, you should, bravery is good. Like, when I don't know if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, or I
Yeah.
could pick almost any great
Hmm.
film.
Hmm.
But like for the Lord of the Rings, you could sit down and tell someone, um, self-sacrifice is good. Um, Sometimes doing the right thing is hard. Sometimes you have to put out maximum effort in order to defeat wickedness.
Yeah.
Um, God is in a cosmic battle with Satan. You
Hmm.
could say all those things in a bullet point list, but telling the epic story of, Middle Earth, with all the beauty that's in it, but also just all the narrative truth that's in it about
Hmm.
self-sacrifice and friendship and love, and um and good versus evil.
Hmm.
It is, you come to the end of that story and you know those things in a different way and in a more
Yeah.
powerful way. So I think, even when we're just doing like one-on-one um, apologetics with an individual, or whatever, you're talking to a person, you just have to recognize that part of what you're trying to do for them is to place them in the story. You're trying to tell them what the story is that they're in the middle
Mhm.
of, is being told in their life, and in the broader world, in God's narrative that he's telling. So to be able to place someone in a story is a very powerful tool, because that's what they're trying to do all day every day. Everyone who goes through life is looking into the details of life and thinking, like, what's the story here? Like, why is this thing happening to me? Why did this
Yeah.
thing happen? When I did that and this was the result, was there a connection there? Like, is there a moral connection in the things that I do? So it's very powerful stuff. It's really powerful stuff. So like with my first two books were just nonfiction, just Christian nonfiction. One's about envy, one's about food. And there are a lot of stories in there. And you also, like, you go listen to a sermon, even a really great sermon. A lot of the time, the stuff that you remember from a sermon is the story, the
Hmm.
stories that got told, or the illustrations, that were in that. Those are
Yeah.
the A lot of the time, those are the most memorable pieces of things that we hear, and it's how we remember a truth or a principle. Um, but So obviously I like to tell true stories in all of my writing. I think it's the most
Sure.
effective, thing that you can do. But this third book is actually fiction in a way, because
Okay.
it's an imitation of the Screw Tape Letters, which is a kind of
Yes.
fiction. Lewis, I mean, if you're a C.S. Lewis fan, are you a Lewis fan at all, or a
Sure.
reader of
Yes.
Lewis? Yeah.
Yes.
So, he in Narnia, in his space trilogy, or his ransom trilogy, in his book Till We Have Faces, like he is a master storyteller, but he doesn't tell stories just for his health. Like, he tells stories in order to get truth across, and I think he does it
Yes.
incredibly well, even at the child level, like in the Narnia series, introducing children to what kind of a person Jesus was, in by introducing this character of Aslan that makes
Mhm.
such a mark on people. But in the Screw Tape Letters, he had this character who was a demon writing letters to another demon, talking about, okay, here's the game plan for tempting your patient. He calls the human being in the story a patient. It's like a young man in the 1940s.
Mhm.
Um, and through this sort of device of these letters, you get first of all a sense of, oh wow, the demonic world is real. Let's remind
Right.
ourselves of that, because we forget. They really do have an opinion about what I'm thinking, what I am doing, how I'm speaking, like all of these things in my life. It actually matters, like on a cosmic level. This is part of this battle that we're all in. And so, what I do this morning with these feelings that I have right this second about my mother-in-law or whatever, like these things actually matter,
Yeah.
in the long term. So it gives you that sense through this sort of narrative vehicle. But I would say with Screw Tape, it's like the closest that I can think of a book that's almost just straight nonfiction. Like, it's almost just topical Christian living essays, but he's got this fiction device to
Yes.
kind of add a little bit of urgency for you
Yes.
as you think, "Oh, this matters." Like, you don't want to see the demons get their way in the patient's life,
Right.
and it causes you to kind of apply that to your own life. So I just basically took that device, and I have a patient who's a woman living today, and there are things like marriage and children and social media, things that we're dealing with now. But using the device of these demons, kind of calculating what's the best way to get this woman further away from the enemy, who is God.
Right.
And it was just I found it to be a really helpful device, because the fiction gave me an opportunity to make a very vivid to give very vivid details and illustrations, in
Mhm.
the story, that I wouldn't have if I was just writing like a straight prose piece for desiring God, like, reasons why you shouldn't have an emotional affair or whatever. It just you can't there was a way of going really deep and vivid into the interior life of this female patient, because of the fiction. So
Yeah.
I found the device to be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
enjoyed, the bits that I read. I read a few chapters from what you sent
Mhm.
over, and,
Mm.
I Screw Tape was one of the first of Lewis's works that I was exposed to many, many years
Mhm.
ago.
Mhm.
I was not into apologetics at the time. I wasn't I was a Christian, but I was not I don't know that I mean, I might have been walking with the Lord faithfully. I don't really remember. It might have just been, if I remember to get up and read my Bible, I do, and if I don't, I don't. I don't really remember, but I do remember, um, reading that book and thinking, "That is cool what he just did," kind of giving us a sneak peek into, like you say, the demonic world, which is real, and how they might actually be strategizing on
Mhm.
all fronts at all times to keep
Mhm.
us from God. And I remember being very touched by that. So I totally kind of see where you're coming from with the idea that story can kind of make us think of things in ways that we haven't thought before, primarily because I would love to see if you would agree with me what your thoughts on this are.
Mhm.
But not only has God given us an imagination, which helps us kind of think outside the box, but most of us get stuck in ruts. This is how we do things. This is how I was taught to do things. This is the way things happen. And we get stuck in ruts. And so when you talk about things like church, or spirituality or morality. You kind of have boxes and you get stuck thinking in those boxes. And heaven forbid you accidentally get stuck in a box that is not exactly right or it doesn't tell the entire story. You may get stuck in that box a lot longer than you would like or than is healthy
Mhm.
for you because you can't think of any other way to conceptualize that particular issue. But if someone tells a story around it, then you might
Yeah.
be able to see, oh, there's things are slightly different, or there might be more to this than what I had originally thought. If you've been impacted by Voices of WIA or any of the resources that we provide, would you consider partnering with us through a monthly gift? Your support helps us continue this very vital work and reach even more women with the tools that they need to stand firm in their faith. I personally support WIA because there aren't enough women's ministries that keep the focus on truth, and I'd love for you to join me by visiting womeninapologetics.com/donate. Is that kind of what you mean as far as a story creating a narrative that gets truth across in a way that is different from just communicating it forthrightly?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, Lewis said something about this. He talked about his fiction writing, that when you tell a story in this sort of fictional way, that you're sneaking past the watchful dragons. And that
Oh,
might be just
remember
the
that.
watchful dragons, might just be like that thing in us that is sort of on guard, or just the habits maybe that are set in place where we're just like, no, this is how I do life. This is what, this is what I think is best or whatever. And when a story comes and kind of grabs you, it can sneak up kind of from it can come at it from the side maybe, or turn the thing upside down a little bit so that you see it from a different angle. And there's a really great Emily Dickinson poem that says, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant. The truth must dazzle gradually."
Oh, I
So
love
the
that.
idea that, like, tell the truth, but give it another angle, or give it another kind of a
Mhm.
new lens or something,
Yeah.
because then it dazzles gradually. Like, it opens your mind up, so that you're able to receive that truth in a different way or in a new way. And narrative is so powerful to do that. It's very powerful.
Yes. So one of the questions I had thought about asking you is what advantages or benefits do you see in understanding creative writing as apologetic? And I'm assuming that this is it because it would allow us, if we are a hearer, it would allow us to see things that are maybe unpleasant or hidden that we hadn't
Mhm.
considered before in a way that's non-threatening. And if we are the storyteller, if we're trying to, maybe we're writing a blog, or maybe we're putting together a Sunday school lesson, or maybe we're just trying to reach our friends and neighbors, with the
Mhm.
gospel, and we're trying to explain a concept that could be very helpful in maybe getting past some of the barriers that the other
Mhm.
person may have as far as how they think about something, or they have a negative opinion about something, or they've dismissed something as a possibility that
Mhm.
might get us around that. Is that essentially how we could apply it?
Yes, I think
Okay.
so. Like, just recognize that. And I've had many people tell me this just anecdotally with this book, that they were like, I didn't think that this particular sin was an issue in my life. I would never really, if someone had just said, "Hey, I think this is a problem for you," I don't think it would have come through. But because it was just a story that I was reading, I was free to kind of throw away the parts that I don't think apply, but also I just kept having this kind of sneak attack into my
Yeah.
conscience of like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow, that is a problem for you," but it was purely through this narrative. And I think in
Yeah.
your kind of one-on-one work with people, anytime you can tell a story from your life, or tell a story that somehow applies. I mean, Jesus in his work with people, he was
Sure.
telling these parables for a reason,
All the time.
right? All the time. And I just think there's so much to learn there from him, that he clearly understood human nature. He understood that this is um a device that is also going to carry from person to person really well, like the mustard seed, illustration. Like, you may have people in different tribes and tongues and nations, with this
Sure.
story, but it translates so well from person to person because it's memorable, and because it connects with people of all ages and all places, as stories tend to do. So, yeah, just remembering that in your work with people, like, remember, this
Mhm.
person is built to crave and connect with stories. So how can I use stories in bringing them along? And then how can I place them in the great story, you know,
Yeah.
as a
Oh,
character?
that's
Mhm,
really so refreshing because I'm sure you probably already know, but for anybody who might not be aware, apologetics is usually considered very dry, very
mhm,
analytical,
mhm,
very emotionless, and especially to women, perhaps very uninteresting because of all that.
mhm,
And so, and I don't think it is. I'm fascinated by it, but not everyone is. And so, this is a really great way to appeal specifically to women, I would think.
mhm,
And like I said, other people that have very rigid concepts, they've already kind of made their mindset. This is a way to kind of break down those barriers, or at least give them something else to think about. One of our favorite books around here is a book called Tactics by Greg Koukl, and one of the things that he
yeah,
says is that you've got to give somebody essentially a pebble in their shoe. You don't have to bring them all the
mhm,
way to the moment of conversion, which most of us think we do, or else we failed, but that's not really true. It's
right,
enough to put a pebble in their shoe, meaning something that they just can't stop thinking about, something that just bugs them and irritates them, and it stays on their mind, and it gives them some food for thought that they can't easily dismiss. And usually he recommends questions, but I could see how storytelling would do that same thing. Like you say, it might just nibble at them a little bit and make them think
mhm,
about something that they otherwise wouldn't have thought about, just because the story is so vivid or so powerful or so personal, or inventive, might even be innovative, like your book.
mhm,
It might be very innovative and give them
mhm,
something to think about.
mhm,
I love that idea. So how would you encourage our audience members in their own creative writing journey to make the most of this when it comes to sharing our faith, which most of us don't do because we're afraid. To be quite
mhm,
honest, we're too afraid. Maybe we're apathetic as well, but
mhm.
maybe that's because we don't know how to get started, and maybe storytelling could be an answer to that. So, how would we get started using creative, or thinking about using creative writing or creative storytelling for this
Mhm.
purpose?
I would say the first thing that I think of, especially when we're talking about verbal encounters,
Mhm.
friends and neighbors and things like that, is we tell our testimonies. This is,
Yes.
we think that like giving that answer that is unanswerable in our I think there is a place for that. Like there are times and places and people who where logic is kind of the name of the game. Like logic is important, and logic was helpful to me. In my, I mean, I told
Sure.
you in my story, but I was also watching. I was watching the life of this family that I was living with for those weeks, and I was watching them be at peace with each other, and I was watching the kind of the story of their lives. And when you're with somebody and you tell them how you came to the Lord and what that has looked like and the story of who Jesus was, that those are really powerful things. Um, and then in the case of writing, I think it's very important to learn your craft really well, like to be reading stuff that's really, really good and imitating really the best of things. I don't like seeing Christians tell stories where they like ram the gospel explicitly into their stories. This is really bad
Sure.
in Christian. This has been very bad in Christian film, I think, in
Yes.
years past,
Yes.
and this is just a misunderstanding, honestly, of how film works, like how screenwriting really works is you cannot you have a theme, you have a clear message in your movie, obviously, but you cannot put that explicit message into the mouth of your characters. Like, that's not how you get truth across in a film. You get truth across by having your characters make decisions in the face of obstacles. So you have good versus evil, right versus wrong, good, truth and beauty versus ugly, and you
Mhm.
sh- you demonstrate that through the characters making choices, but you do not anytime you start saying the theme of the movie or the message of the movie through the mouth of your characters, your audience is automatically their brains are turning off. They're just like, "Oh, okay, so it's a sermon. Why don't you just give me a sermon?"
Yeah.
Because it's just not effective. It's not that's not how you want that truth. It's not that there
Sure.
isn't a place for sermons. It's just The story is a different device. So you have to learn to use that device effectively. And if it's a novel or, something else like that, like learn from the best. Don't don't try to shoehorn the gospel message into the mouth of your characters. But just if you learn how to tell a story beautifully, you are doing good work and you are
Mhm.
telling the truth. You're doing it through narrative.
So
So,
if somebody was going to try to make it a point to incorporate this into her own life
mhm,
for evangelism purposes or whatever, I would assume that at the very least you would want, maybe a creative writing class or a journal or a diary
mhm.
or some kind of devotional kind of thing where you're writing things out so you can get into the process into the habit of thinking along storytelling lines or
Yes, right. So
something
you're
like
just
that, or maybe
just the
even just a
practice of
story
writing.
bank. I know I when I was there's been a couple times when I've hired speaking coaches to kind of help me work through a message, and they will usually say, "Figure out what you want to say, and then preface it with a story."
Mhm. Yeah.
And so we need. Can you think of any things that you could encourage our audience to maybe pursue on their own to
Yes.
develop this skill?
Yeah. So I would say read, 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 read. Like you've got to be reading and you can't just
Okay.
be reading the same amount that you're writing. It's not, you have to be reading, 10, 20 times more material than you're writing to be writing well. I do think handwriting, like having the practice of a journal, a
Mhm.
prayer journal, or just a copybook, even where you take things that have stood out to you from a piece of writing. It's like a what's it like a commonplace journal. I don't know if you've heard of those, just that are literally for the copying out of phrases or verses or things that were beautiful to you. But I do think doing a lot of writing by hand, a lot of the best ideas or structures that I've had, or even the beginning of a chapter or an article, has come from handwriting. I don't finish things that way, but I do tend to start things that way. And there's been a lot of studies on the act of handwriting to develop our thoughts and even our skills in writing. So I would highly recommend the handwriting as a way of getting better, making sure you're doing some of that every day.
Okay.
And then there are a lot of really great secular writing courses out there. So I would say, whatever it is that you're trying to pursue, the novel or the short story or the article or whatever, there are definitely resources out there. Um, I don't know if I can tell you exactly what those are. Yeah, because I haven't read any of them in a while, but the quality of your reading, you're never going to write anything better than what you read.
That makes sense.
So the quality of your reading
That makes
matters.
sense. This has been a great conversation. Before we go, though, if somebody wanted to follow you or find your book, how would they do that?
Mhm. Yeah, all of my books are just on Amazon. You can Google my name at Desiring God for articles. And then I don't have a blog or an Instagram really at this time. So you just have to get on. And then the Home Fires podcast is available just anywhere
Okay.
podcasts exist. So that's a partnership with another writer, Abigail Dodds.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
mhm.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your homeschooling day to sit with us and talk with us about this because I think it's so interesting and so helpful. And that might be a really good tool for helping women dip their toes into
Mhm.
apologetics and evangelism in general.
Yeah,
So thank you so much. I appreciate you.
thank you. I've
You're
enjoyed
welcome.
it.
I loved that conversation, audience. I hope you did too. So, WIA has so many resources that you may or may not know about: articles, videos, social media, quick guides, courses, merchandise like the t shirt I'm wearing, and this sweet coffee cup, which is my favorite. So, to see what we have available and to donate to the work we do, or just become a member of our email community, just visit our website at womeninapologetics.com. So, from everyone here at your WIA team, thank you so much for joining us in today's video, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.